So what we're going to do is we're going to watch Tukayyid, I will ramble, and then we're going to do Henry Stickmin. And that's the plan for tonight. How's that sound? Let me know if this angle is good or if we need to adjust it more. I'll turn my wings off if I have to, but I'm super happy about them and really don't want to. Okay. So, at 26 minutes long, I am assuming he's not going to get into all the background details of how we get to Tukayyid. So I'm going to do a little bit of background for people who aren't familiar with the Battletech / MechWarrior story, universe, whatever. And then I'll hit play and see just how redundant I was or wasn't. Okay, so Battletech / I'm going to call it that interchangeably. I don't want to keep saying both every time. So Battletech is a far-flung future universe after which humanity has gone to the stars, gone to war, many times, united, separated. The big sort of starting point for it is the end of the Star League, which was when most of humanity was united under a single government. And it collapsed and dissolved into civil war. Nikolai Kerensky, who was like the great hero, last great leader of the Star League, took his most loyal following, champion warriors and so on, picked them up and left. And went to space. Well, they were already in space. Went out to the far reaches beyond where humanity has explored, disappeared. And the rest of these nations, making up what became to be known as the Inner Sphere, continued to war and build nations and destroy nations and stuff, and blast each other to pieces, and manipulated by Comstar, who I know Tex refers to frequently as Space AT&T. He is very correct to do that, because one of their founding companies is AT&T, and they are a telecommunications company, but they control all the FTL communications. You have to go through them if you want to be able to talk to anyone without sending couriers, which can take days to weeks or longer. They have so much central power just as a communications company that the primary universal currency is C-bills, which is just Comstar credits to use their system. Whenever you see in a MechWarrior game that you're getting paid in C-bills, that's what that is. So that's where that's the very basic setup. The ultra basic doesn't explain anything. Setup for the Inner Sphere, and what in the conflict that leads to the Battle of Tukayyid is the invasion of the clans from outside the Inner Sphere. They have extremely advanced technology. They're a very warrior-like, honor-based culture, but they're still humans, sort of. They are attacking, and these are actually the descendants of those loyalists to Kerensky. But Kerensky's own views have sort of been twisted and distorted by them. So even though they are technically the inheritors of the Star League, and certainly see themselves as the inheritors of the Star League, they've got their own problems. And they've also become obsessed with this honor type culture to the point where it's actually a weakness to them. And I don't want to say a whole lot more there, because that gets into Tukayyid itself, and I'm sure Tex will probably explain it a whole lot more. The last thing that I'm going to say as a little background for where we get from regular old sci-fi to mech sci-fi is the fact that mechs are actually how nations capable of glassing entire planets at the push of a button keep themselves from wiping humanity out. There's basically massive bans and limits on other weapon systems, but the concept of the mechs weren't used prior to these bans, and so there was nothing dictating limitations or restrictions around mechs, which is how mechs came to be. They were a way to circumvent these limitations. So in universe, mechs are extremely impractical. You always get this argument in military circles that there's no way or reason that a mech-based weapon would ever be practical. Battletech agrees, but the mechs aren't restricted by the treaty limitations, so they are what end up getting used as the primary weapons. But the inherent weaknesses of a mech platform mean that mean that they are still, to a degree at least, self-contained to prevent civilization wipeout levels of destruction. That is the ultra short boiled down version of how we get from here to there. On to the actual video and see how much of this Tex ended up explaining that I didn't need to say, but
Hey there folks, Tex the Black Pants Legion here. Yes, we're working on the next Tex Talks Battletech.
Why don't I have sound? It says you guys can hear stuff, but I can't hear anything. What's going on?
Hey there folks, Tex the Black Pants Legion here. Yes, we're working on the next Tex Talks Battletech, but this one here is going to be a special. An in-between episode. This episode is something that had to be said, and had to be said today of all days. Those of you who know why are smiling. Those of you who don't, well, buckle up. Here comes an education. Today is not a talk about a machine. Today is a celebration. Today is made the... It's not a talk about a machine.
The urban mech is the greatest mech ever built. Prove me wrong.
Today is a celebration. Today is May the 20th. Today we remember the Battle of Tukayyid. May the 20th, 3052 ended a battle, and in essence, a war. In a single contest of will, manpower, supplies, and crazy, the clan invasion was stopped dead on a formerly sleepy agricultural world. A world that was chosen as a proxy battle site in a desperate attempt to trick the clans into stopping their war machine in its tracks by taking advantage of their stupid, stupid ways. After all, the stakes were as high as they could be. By 3052, the clans were making great conquests of the Inner Sphere, nearly annihilating Rosselhog and threatening the capital of the Draconis Combine. A threat so serious the DCMS lightened their death to all mercenary stance just a tad.
Yeah, the Draconis Combine is obsessed with the government having control over everything. Mercenaries, by their very nature, are not controlled by the government. They don't get along well with the Draconis Combine. But that is how many losses the Combine suffered, that they actually lightened up on that after generations and generations of hating mercenaries.
It was assumed that if this war continued, the Inner Sphere would be a dominion of the clans within a few short years. The great houses, while having a numerical advantage, were struggling to defend themselves. This, for them, was a different kind of war. Their seemingly inadequate equipment and frontline combatants melted time and again in the face of clan discipline, superior training, and people bred for conflict just like this. When it became apparent that Terra was the primary invasion objective, Comstar stepped out of the shadows and decided to act. Comstar could no longer fence sit and facilitate. Comstar had to roll up its sleeves and show the clanners who was boss. Comstar, being the shifty fucks they are, decided to abuse the system. This is called asymmetrical strategic planning. In layman's terms, this is called tactical fuckery. So Comstar, being Comstar and having studied their opponents in detail, they decided to bring the clans to a single point and annihilate them. In 3052, Comstar issued a batch-all. Batch-all in clanner speak is a direct challenge.
It's a portmanteau of battle challenge. Batch-all.
Contest of wills to be won. And this was a challenge that the clans could not, without significant loss of honor, pass up. Comstar openly challenged the invading clans to the following. Fight on a chosen world, in this case Tukayyid. The clans would be invited to bring their very best. Comstar would bring theirs. Each clan would have 2 cities as objectives. If the clans could conquer and hold them, they would win. Comstar would act as the defenders and would try to contest the objectives with all they had. If the clans won, Comstar would make no challenge to the clan conquest. If the clans were to lose, however, they would have to obey a 15-year truce on their honor to halt all further invasion from a delineation line set at Tukayyid. To this direct challenge, the clanners agreed. This was bargained and done. After all, how could they refuse a direct challenge from a jumped-up telecom company pretending to be the inheritors of Star League? The nerve on those bastards. As it turns out, underestimating Comstar would be about as smart as letting Michael Vick babysit your dog. Immediately, clanners began to bargain internally for the privilege of drop order, or who gets to hit the planet first and how much shit they intend to bring. This was a contest in itself, bidding forces in order of battle, in order to out-honor the honorable honor for honor's sake. Honor on the side, hold the honor with extra honor. Some clanners even did almost a 3rd grade level of homework on their opposing commander, Comstar's own Anastasius Focht. The clanners dismissed him as a paper general, someone with no military experience, leading an army of bureaucrats driving machines they couldn't understand from an era long gone. The clanners thought he was nothing more than a pretender, a joke, a noble in the guise of a soldier. He was to them a non-threat, leading an army of children, pretending at war. The clans had brought their best and brightest. To answer a call of this extraordinary magnitude, they fielded their best commanders and most elite battle-hardened soldiers. They brought forward their best mechs and equipment from the invasion corridors. They would take to this field of battle with their khans leading from the front. This was their greatest challenge of the era. This was their finest hour. They realized this would be a glorious battle sung for generations, a tipping point in their history.
They're not wrong.
Oh, how right they were. You have to understand, this was what clanners had wanted, a triumph of their way of life, their society, their ethos versus the barbarians they intended to conquer. Above all, honor was on the line. It was a challenge to everything they stood for, and defeat seemed impossible. Finally, the Inner Sphere had the grit to actually obey their correct rules of combat, and issue a challenge to determine this all in a reasonable manner to a clanner. Finally, the Inner Sphere would play by their rules. But, as it turns out, where the clan was concerned with honor and protocol, Comstar was concerned with, well, winning. On the defense, Comstar brought everything they had. Protocols of ancient technologies were unsealed, opened, and emptied, and pressed into the hands of untested, but well-trained and semi-green pilots. Some of these...
He's kind of underselling it a little bit here. The Comm Guard is treated in universe by people who don't know any better as just a bunch of honor guard who sit around the giant FTL communication platforms, keeping them safe. The comm guard are drawn from the best of the best in the inner sphere. The Comstar poaches anyone and everyone that they can from the top of the military academies, from the best mercenary groups, from extremely skilled but dishonored and or shamed officers and nobles. They will frequently show up at the gladiator arenas because there's gladiator fights, and find the champions and be like, hey, do you want a really easy, really well-paying job? And hire them. And then, of course, so you do get some green people, but you also get a lot of their leaders are some of the most battle-hardened and experienced people in the inner sphere, who are teaching the green people how to do what they do. So when he says well-trained, understand that that's not just, oh, they have a good academy. That is, they have stacked the deck in every way conceivable in terms of skill and training and cream of the crop.
Pilots took to the field in weapons that had in many cases not been used in 300 years. For this titanic conquest, Comstar emptied every garrison in the inner sphere except Terra. Comstar dedicated 12 entire armies to the field of battle, and was prepared to lose them all to save Terra alone. And while the comm guards were an admittedly untested force of green pilots, they had excellent training and knew the stakes. If they could win just this once, they would stop the invasion. Because clanners didn't know how to engage in takesies-backsies with any level of aptitude and just invade anyways if they lost. But if Comstar lost and mangled the clan war machine, they could buy time for reinforcements from the great houses. Either way, Comstar was going into the battle knowing this would be a meat grinder. Even with their equipment being close to battle parity, they would be the underdog, and this would be their Alamo. The order of battle for 3052 is well documented. This is the clan drop order for Tukayyid and their objectives. And the battle that unfolded was apocalyptic.
Okay, I think he skipped over some of how this works with clans. So he mentioned a little bit of bidding, of a like auction bidding type system, and which helped determine this order. The clans come from a very resource poor area of space. There's not a whole lot of places that they can just go out and get more raw materials, despite it being space and planets being a thing. Anyways, so which is part of what built up their honor system. Commanders of units will say, okay, I control 30 mechs. I will leave 10 of them back in the hangar and only use 20 to take this objective. And then a rival commander will say, well, I'm going to take 15. If you send me, I will only use 15. That's 5 less mechs than that guy. And I will still take this objective. And usually whoever ends up bidding the least is the one who gets to actually take command and commit to the operation, while the other one has to sit in the sidelines and watch, or be the backup force if the first force doesn't work. And they do this so that the least amount of forces are at risk of being lost. And the idea is that, well, if you can take an objective using a very limited force, well, then you're that much better of a commander, and it costs the clan that much less. So when you go to this clan drop order,
and the battle order 3050,
Clan Smoke Jaguar gets the first drop because they looked at this massive army they had and said, we're going to leave 2/3 of it at home. I think it was 2/3, it's something like that. They hit the planet with only like 1/3, somewhere in that neighborhood, of their available combat force, with the idea that the other 2/3 will not get involved at all. And in return for doing that, they get to be the first people that hit the planet. They get to be the first people to try to win. Then, Clan Wolf, who has been beaten to a pulp by the Inner Sphere. They have seen what the Inner Sphere and a little bit of what Comstar can do when they get serious. And they understand, unlike Smoke Jaguar, that the Inner Sphere doesn't play by clan rules. The Inner Sphere deploys everything they have, every time, all the time. So, Clan Wolf understands that Comstar is deploying their entire military force in order to try to fight this battle. There is no competitive fighting over who's going to take what stuff. So Clan Wolf is last because they said, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to bring everyone. And as punishment, they were told, okay, you're going to wait almost a week before we even let you try then, because you're being so wasteful with resources. So that's how this whole thing happens, and a very basic explanation of the bidding system. Mech Warrior gets complicated before you ever fire a shot.
Unfolded was apocalyptic. The planet-wide battle lasted from the 1st of May to the 20th. For 20 days, the fate of the inner...
That word is obvious. That's pay your bills. That's what the slogan is. Pay your bills, that word.
Sphere was held in the balance as a telecom company fought invaders from beyond the sphere. And how they did it is really something else. Comstar may be a lot of things, crazy, duplicitous, deceptive, all-knowing, quasi-religious fanatics, but they had very little practical experience in warfare. In fact, prior to this point, Comstar more or less had to eliminate problems using the old Soviet method.
Yep, pay your bills, fucko.
Comstar was, beneath everything else, an information-based organization and drew on history for the direction.
I actually think, with the exception of fucko, I actually think it's pretty close. And I accidentally talked over that. But I think that's pretty close to correct Latin.
Experience in warfare. In fact, prior to this point, Comstar more or less had to eliminate problems using the old Soviet method.
Yep. Still Russian method too.
With everything else, an information-based organization and drew on history for the direction for this battle. Comstar opted for defense in depth, also known as an elastic defense, also known as a castle defense, or in the modern era as a hippity-hoppity get-off-my-property, and pulled out all stops by using a series of rapid, unending hit-and-run engagements against the invaders. The defense was dependent on hitting the clanners at every opportunity, ambushing them, then retreating, hitting and fading, and pushing them to the breaking point all the while. Clanners had the advantage in mobility and equipment. Double heat sinks negate a lot of heat, so the Inner Sphere had to push them all that much harder, and as soon as the clanners mustered a counterattack, the Inner Sphere would fade away, leading to the next offensive point, and then engage again. So every time the clanners paused to think, they dropped artillery and airstrikes on their head. Every time they paused to survey a path, they were hit by marauding scout vehicles, mechs, VTOLs, aerospace assets, or even more artillery. Sometimes Comstar would let clanner scout vehicles pass the main body, and then snap to ambush the main column advance, cutting scouts off and surprising the hell out of everyone. Prepared defenses allowed Comstar to achieve a spectacular success in defense in depth. All battle preparations were for rapid redeployment of forces, reconsolidation of damaged units, and hardened defensive points to force clanners to battle. Even the ground was prepared in advance for this bloodbath. Every bridge was rigged to blow or set to sabotage. Concealed bunkers along every attack route provided excellent firing points and served as effective anchors for defense in depth. Entire cities were completely covered into elaborate kill zones. Every access corridor was a trap. Every road was a potential minefield. Every field of planted grain potentially sown with explosives or concealing weapon systems. Clanners had to worry that behind every blade of grass was a rifle barrel, a bayonet, a missile, a tank, an artillery piece, or a mech.
Creed!
Comstar had prepared the planet into an enormous killing field, and when the battle commenced, the comm guards hit them like a vengeful god. And how did the clan manage in the face of all this? Let me tell you a story. When Clan Smoke Jaguar hit the planet, they landed with 2 full galaxies of units. This is the equivalent of several brigades of power armor-wearing, nightmare-fuel-drinking, eugenics-born stormtroopers, psychotic mech pilots devoid of all human emotion but hate and pride, and the leadership needed to drive these tools into the heart of the enemy with zero hesitation. And Comstar completely ruined them by exploiting terrain, prepared defensive positions, and in one spectacular instance, getting them to advance through a seemingly undefended pass, only to spring an ambush and turn it into a shooting gallery. Comstar fighting Smoke Jaguar was like the Harlem Globetrotters versus third graders. When Smoke Jaguar gave up and left the planet with full material losses calculated in, they lost all but 22% of their equipment. 32% of their total committed forces were killed outright. More were horrifically mangled and damaged beyond any use to the clan war machine. The Jaguars had kept fighting, thinking that they had almost annihilated their enemies, because who could stand against them? They were Smoke Jaguar. They were goaded into yet one more attack, one more stand, one more battle, over and over and over again, because they believed they were on the verge of victory, and every time Comstar would hit them all the harder. Smoke Jaguar could not conceive of an enemy that could stand up to their might. Well, Comstar did, and succeeded. And they didn't stop there. When Clan Nova...
Before he continues, I just remembered something. The individual battles of Tukayyid were player battles of the tabletop game. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this right, at least. The makers of the books and the tabletop game sent out an announcement saying that this is what they're going to do. These are the forces involved, and they asked players to send in their battle reports to play according to what they had written would be the setup, and send in their battle reports, which would then become the Battle of Tukayyid. So when you're seeing all this stuff, it's based on players playing the two sides and having these rules of war that the company gave them and playing accordingly, which I think is just pretty awesome. So when he's talking about this stuff, in a sense, even though it's a fictional world for a tabletop game, this stuff actually happened on some level in real life, which is just awesome.
Cat decided to land troops and equipment using a spectacular demonstration of the incredibly effective hover drop maneuver, showing off their elite skill. Clan Novacat decided to land troops and equipment using a spectacular demonstration of the incredibly effective hover drop maneuver, showing off their elite skill before their enemies on the field of battle. Comstar decided enough was enough and ruined their air show. How? Comstar blitzed aerospace assets in, attacked and kamikazed the dropships. In an instant, Nova Cat lost Alpha Galaxy's command ship, and the rest were immediately grounded. In this confusion, Comstar gained air superiority, and guess how that went? They turned the landing zone into a turkey shoot. After the comm guards easily managed to maintain air superiority over the drop zones and shot the living bejesus out of the clanners as they tried to forge a beachhead, leaving the Nova Cats in short supply with extreme difficulties in maintaining any effective communication, command, and control. As it turns out, it's hard to do any of the above while getting your ass handed to you by crazy people. The comm guards then launched an all-out kamikaze attack while the Nova Cats were busy trying to capture Comstar Depot. Why? They were out of supplies. At a tremendous loss, Nova Cat was pushed off the planet. Why? Comstar threw everything they had at them while they had their backs turned. Of their invasion force, 3 Nova Cat stars survived. That's 15 mechs out of an invasion force. It was a near total wipe, and that's not the worst beating that was delivered. When Clan Diamond Shark landed, they had an army. When they left, it was gone. A memory. An entire invasion force relegated to the past tense. Later, when Steel Viper landed, they were goaded by Comstar into continuing their attack to such a point that they ran out of ammunition, until they ran into the 321st and 401st Comm Guards, who had plenty, and decided to share it with them at gunpoint.
For Diamond Sharks, when he says they had an army and then they didn't, the only combat forces that were left of Diamond Shark were one of their cons who ran away and the rear depot guard, who were regular humans, not genetically engineered like the regular soldiers, who were in mechs and just told, look, sit here and guard this and guard our ammo for us. That was all they had left. And the guy who ran away only survived because a sizable chunk of that rear guard sacrificed itself to protect him running away.
Viper lost so hard their con resigned. And on and on and on it went. Every time a clanner commander tried to back down, a Comstar commander would issue a challenge to get them to do stupid things. Then Comstar would be waiting there with enough forces to jump on them like amphetamine-soaked circus monkeys. The clanners were unprepared for a war like this. This was not a war they had ever fought before. And thanks to Comstar's success, it was not a war they would ever fight again. Comstar didn't falter. They knew the cost of this. They bulldozed the corpses of their fallen comrades out of the way and kept attacking. When a clanner unit was spotted, something was flying at it. Artillery, rockets, missiles, aerospace assets, VTOLs, tanks, infantry, whatever was at hand was put on that problem until it stopped. Comstar ground its own forces down on the clans, knowing that no matter how fancy their crap was, you could still die if you tried hard enough. And in the end, the clans lost. Only Clan Wolf managed to achieve its stated objectives. Ghost Bear and Jade Falcon took a draw. Every single other clan flatly lost. And not just lost. Some were eradicated in all but name. By guess, it's roughly estimated that clanners lost 40% of their committed fighting forces, and many more were horribly damaged. This would be bad enough for any army, considering that it would take them out of the fight for years even if their resupply and supporting logistics were on the front lines with them. Which they weren't. They were all the way back in clanner space. But this is one step worse. This isn't just clanner rank and file, this is the best they fucking had. They had brought out their very best with their most promising commanders, only to be utterly annihilated. They lost more than they could ever hope to replace in such a short time. They lost irreplaceable weapons, manpower, entire generations of their finest, to include 2 Khans on the field of battle. The Green Comm Guards managed to grind the clan war machine to a damn halt by throwing their bodies into the fray and fighting until they died screaming. Every time a Comm Guard was gunned down, another stepped up to take their place. Mech after mech, tank after tank, infantryman after infantryman. From PPC to bayonet, Comstar fought them and died for every inch of soil. Needless to say, Comstar's losses were beyond count. As it turns out, if you fight a war like Zukov, you're going to lose a few people. This defeat changed the clans. It rocked them. It upset their way of everything. It changed their culture. Some clans changed the way they viewed the Inner Sphere and became wardens instead of crusaders. Some clans had lost their entire command and control on the fields of battle. Some lost all of their functional equipment in the invasion corridor, removing them as a power for years to come. Some had lost every great warrior and every promising warrior for a generation. Clans like Steel Viper would make themselves feel better by deciding to crusade against the Jade Falcons and, well, sorting things out through hurt feelings. Clans like Diamond Shark would find themselves suddenly in a better place as their warrior caste more or less disappeared overnight, only to be replaced by a very forward-thinking, friendly, and diplomatic merchant caste. Some clans would look at the Inner Sphere in silence.
Yeah, that's something I didn't mention. The soldier class and the clans run everything. So when they're completely wiped out, there's the government. There goes the government.
Friendly and diplomatic merchant caste. Some clans would look at the Inner Sphere in silent awe, wondering why this had happened in the first place. They were confused. What had they gained? Why did they fight this way? Their opponent had invited them to fight, and it was a fight they foolishly underbid and lost because their honor demanded it. It was a fight they lost because honor was more important than strategic vision.
Yep.
And sadly, it was a battle they lost to a glorified, self-important, fanatical telecommunications company.
Yep.
And this victory was everything to the Inner Sphere. Mostly it gave a sense of unity to the Inner Sphere, for a time anyways.
Yeah.
They would do this in record time. However, on the technical side, the scrap and salvage recovery would bolster engineering, research, and design efforts in the Inner Sphere for years to come. And now, the opinion of an asshole. Why the clan lost wasn't purely for honor's sake, though. That played a part. A crap culture plus a crap value system equals crap battle theory. However, the clanners weren't only undone by their cultural ideology, they were undone by an asshole exploiting it. Remember Focht? Anastasius Focht?
Yep.
The bureaucrat general playing war? Turns out he wasn't a bureaucrat. And truth be told, that wasn't even his real name. He was born Frederick Steiner. He was at one point the scion of House Steiner. He was a hero and a mad bastard. He was an accomplished leader and commander of men, and not without a dark side. His dangerous path through life led him to take a new name and become reborn as Anastasius Focht after burning his bridges as a Steiner royal. He was handed over to Comstar, and with his new name came new duties. Through Comstar, he became a defender of the Inner Sphere, a commander of men again. He was a phenomenal military mind before his rebirth, and was at core a soldier and little else. With the resources of Comstar and their omnipresent intelligence operations, he was the perfect man to win at Tukayyid. He knew that to defeat an enemy you had to overpower them, outsmart them, and in the end, crush them. He was so driven to flatly destroy enemies that all of his opponents throughout his life considered him to be completely incapable of subtlety. He was more than ready to throw bodies at a problem until the problem went away. He knew the enemy could not replace losses too easily, and clearly saw the means to cripple the clan war machine. As a man, he hated politics, he hated social courtesy, he hated protocol, he hated honor and bowing. He only liked war. And the clanners made the worst mistake possible you can make when looking at an opponent. They dismissed him as a joke and failed to respect him, and for that he fucking broke them. For the end.
Remember what I said about Comstar vacuuming up any and every promising military person, be they soldier or tactician or whatever? Yeah, that.
I'll turn to a quote from the man himself. Wars are not won on the field of combat. Battles are. But those
Accurate.
are only ever part of the story. To win a war, you need to break the enemy's resolve, to force him to accept defeat.
Accurate.
Otherwise, the war will never end. Too many conflicts persist because battles are won, but the hearts and minds of the people are not. Winning involves every level of society. From the generals and the politicians to the shop girls and the street cleaners. The infantryman with his rifle may be the blunt weapon used to win this fight, but he is neither the instigator nor the concluder. TLDR, the clans brought their best. And Space AT&T said, "Get bent, weirdo." Next time, though, we'll get back to what I promised. A space story. Catch fuck off with the laser pointer.
It's a laser sight. These future guns kick ass.
I don't care. You could put someone's eye out.
Okay, fine. It turns out that's not a safety. The more you know.
God damn it, Catch.
Ah, I love some of these custom songs they have.
Problem is solved. Where the microwaves play down at 3 degrees K, and the cold virus never evolved. Home, home on Lagrange, where the space debris always collects. We possess, so it seems, two of man's greatest dreams: solar power and zero-G sex. We eat algae pie, our vacuum is high, our ball bearings are perfectly round, our horizon is curved, our warheads are merged, and a kilogram weighs half a pound.
Thanks for the follow.
Home, home on Lagrange, where the space debris
In Lyra, I believe. Am I pronounced that right?
We possess, so it seems, two of man's greatest.
Sorry, I'm enjoying the song.
Solar power and zero-G sex.
What?
Run out of space.
And thank you for the lemon, Blue Kitty.
Race. No more Lebensraum left for the mensch. When we're ready to start, we will take Mars apart if we just find a big enough wrench. Home, home on Lagrange, where the space debris always collects. We possess, so it seems, two of man's greatest dreams: solar power and zero-G sex. I'm sick of this place, it's just McDonald's and space, and living up here is a bore. Well, the Shiggies don't cry, they can kiss me goodbye, 'cause I'm moving next week to L4. Home, home on Lagrange, where the space debris always collects. We possess, so it seems, two of man's greatest dreams: solar power and zero-G sex.
Very good. They also have one called Van Zant that I really
Hippity
like.
Get off my property.
Yep, I am gonna send the link out right now. And it is linked to a charity. So, high recommendations. helping kids fight cancer. So there is a high recommendation there. And also for Tukayyid itself, there is a song by Storm about it, also called Tukayyid, that I would highly recommend. It's very good as well. That was excellent. Tex does some really good work. I found him, I think the first thing I found him on was either the Urban Mech video, which we will be doing even though I've already seen it, or the Fiesta Pale highlights. It was one of those two, both of which are absolutely hilarious. So even though I've obviously seen them, they may be included in the Battletech reactions instead of just sticking to ones that I haven't seen, because I've only seen a couple of these so far, I think. Anyways, that was a good one though. Tex does some really fantastic work. Like I said, high recommend for anyone to go have a look at some of his stuff. He is hilarious and really knows his stuff. And he even got, was it General Motors or General Electric to tell him to leave them alone, because they make in universe they make mech stuff and theoretically are developing some things now if the universe's timeline is correct. Looked up the Latin saying. Yeah, I can't remember if it's General Electric or General Motors, but in the MechWarrior universe, they are a major components manufacturer. Still, 1,000 years later, they're still around. And it actually says, yep. And so Tex continually kept sending them messages and mail asking them if he can look at stuff like their fusion reactor and things. And eventually he got a letter back telling him, please leave us alone. We're begging you. Let's see. Can I find this? Is it General Motor? I think it is. Yep, it's General Motors. And here we go, and got a oh jeez, a lot of this is just redacted. GM doesn't respond to batches. Please just stop asking us about self-sustaining fusion reactors already. Not tonight, but I think maybe these ones should be next on our list of things to. Oh, that's 2 hours. Holy smokes. That's 2 hours. Maybe I don't. We might have to do that in parts.